Hey folks, so I saw the long-awaited David Bowie documentary Moonage Daydream this week, and I have some thoughts. You may be aware that earlier this year I made a video about the failed David Bowie biopic Stardust, a dull and unambitious film about the pre-Ziggy Stardust years that was in no way endorsed by Bowie's estate, and for a good reason. I was curious about Stardust because I've always considered David Bowie's life to be surely one of the most complex to capture in a satisfying portrait. Not just for the sheer volume of things that the man has done, but because David Bowie the person was an enigma, a true mirror to the world that to try and embody him would be a fool's errand. Needless to say, I did not like Stardust, but around the time I made that video, I learned of a proper Bowie film that was being fully endorsed by his estate to be released later in 2022, and on Monday night, I saw it. Moonage Daydream is of course not a biopic, but a documentary, and a genuine labour of love from writer, director, producer, and editor of the film, Brett Morgen. Yet, I would say the term documentary doesn't quite illustrate what Morgen achieves here. There's no modern day talking head interviews or lower third texts indicating what year we're in. We're not granted a comprehensive breakdown of the facts and stats of David Bowie, but instead are invited to experience a cinematic odyssey of epic proportions. There does happen to be a narrator, and it's none other than the man himself, David Bowie. Through countless interviews, live performances, Bowie films, and music videos, we are presented with a kaleidoscopic portrait of the artist's life that swirls and manifests as a journey into David Bowie's own mind. The film is mostly linear, but offers reflections into the past as well as glimpses into the future as we travel through the different eras of the shape-shifting chameleon. I really loved how each persona and period is edited to reflect the energy and feeling of its respective time. The Ziggy Stardust era presents Bowie from the perspective of his adoring fans, who treated Ziggy like a messiah as they hang off every word and hip thrust of the red-haired, sexually liberated alien. The Berlin period is much more stark and minimal, as the documentary departs from the frenzied Thin White Duke era to a slowed down and focused style that brought the 70s to a close, and allowed Bowie to rid himself of his prior internal conflicts and addictions. These addictions, such as the obscene amount of cocaine he consumed in the mid-70s, are merely implied and never mentioned, a reminder that this documentary is endorsed by his estate, also meaning the film doesn't offer much in the way of a critique of the artist, at least beyond what he gave himself. I've even seen a few people point out that because of this, we don't really learn anything new about David Bowie, and they do have a point. Much of this footage and interview content has been around for decades, but I think people haven't quite appreciated how well Brett Morgen synthesized this mountain of archival content and turned it into a compelling portrait of a legendary icon. Interview excerpts are mixed with added psychedelic visuals and astonishingly well-mixed sound from Tony Visconti that altogether tells the story of Bowie's life, not in a traditional biographical sense, but in an immersive flurry of sound and vision that provides a deeper understanding of what he's here on Earth to do, what drives his creativity, the internal and external that constantly inspired his artistry, and what it meant for him to be human. As someone who is quite a fan of Bowie but by no means an expert, I actually learnt a lot about him. For example, I never registered how much of a nomad David Bowie was. He never even purchased a home until the 1980s, instead living in cities all around the world, allowing each place to inform his writing. I laughed when he mentioned how revolting Los Angeles is as a city, and because of that decided he must live there for some time just to see what such a place would allow him to create. I mean, talk about suffering for your art. For me, one of the most fascinating parts of the film was when we arrive in the mid-80s as Bowie enters his most commercially successful phase, but also one of his biggest struggles as he begins to see himself betraying his artistic values. I came to see this hard turn into more accessible pop music as almost its own persona, the unsatisfied hitmaker wrestling once again with his identity in an ever-consuming world of MTV and advertising. Oh, and for you Beatles fans, there's a wonderful clip, I believe, from his 1978 stage tour, where he's performing Jean Genie, which turns into a big sing-along of Love Me Do. It's a real highlight. The film glosses over much of his 90s and 2000s work and doesn't even mention Tin Machine once, which I know some fans will be disappointed with, but there is no time wasted on extraneous details here. This is a man who lived several lifetimes before he turned 50. Seeing him at work, be it in music, film, or even his many paintings, whilst listening to his philosophy on creativity, meaning, and fame, allows us to see how much of an artist, in the truest sense of the word, he really was. I'm writing this review after having only seen it the one time, and I definitely think there's much more to this film than what I'm letting on here, but Yeah, I think you should absolutely go and see this. And see it on a big screen if you can. They're also playing it at IMAX, which I would absolutely recommend. This film also puts an end to the discussion of if there should ever be another David Bowie biopic, because it's so clear that no one is going to do a better job of explaining Bowie other than himself. The immersive psychedelic approach of Moonage Daydream can feel rather chaotic at times, but as Bowie points out in the film, the greatest mistake that civilization made was to embrace order rather than chaos. Because out of chaos comes beauty and art and change. This is a mesmerizing, fragmented voyage of technicolor and artistic philosophy that left me speechless when it finished, and I think will stick with me for a very long time. It really makes the grade. What's up everyone? Hope you like this slightly shorter video. Let me know if these mini reviews are something you'd like to see more from me, as well as my longer video essay type ones as well. Have you seen Moonage Daydream yet? If you have, let me know what you think down in the comments. As you can see, I'm pretty excited about this film. I really want to talk about it, so I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you to all my lovely patrons, and if you like what I do, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I've got some cool bonus videos, plus you can contribute to polls and get early access of the stuff I post on YouTube, and of course the financial support is always greatly appreciated. I've got some upcoming videos that I'm quite excited about, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any of them, and otherwise I will talk to you folks in the next one. See ya.